Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Today, I am very excited to be joined by two members of HawkSoft leadership, Mr. Sean Hawkins, the president, co-founder, and chief product officer at HawkSoft, and Matt Aman, the chief technology officer. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the show.
Brad, we're excited to be here. This will be a great conversation today.
Super excited to get into this topic and hear just some of HawkSoft's thoughts on what you're looking at for this topic that is evolving so fast. For those that don't know, Sean Hawkins has over 30 years experience in technology and computer programming. Sean is responsible for helping shape the vision and direction of the HawkSoft platform. Matt joined the HawkSoft team in 2019, and he focuses on the how behind the platform's architecture and the future of technical innovations. Today, we're here to talk about the rapidly evolving topic of AI, and I'm sure you guys as an organization have been asked a lot about what is HawkSoft doing, what is being considered. So super excited to learn myself and for our audience to learn more of what HawkSoft's approach will be. So with that, to start, talk about what HawkSoft's approach right now is on AI.
First off, as we talk about this today, I know that I use AI every day, all day. I use it. I still do some development. I use it for coding. I use it for composing emails. I use it for summarizing things. We're using it extensively throughout a lot of our teams. Having said that, I have a love-hate relationship with AI. There are times where it works great and there's times where it doesn't. There's a lot of hype right now with AI, and we have this concept that it can do everything. And the reality is what they're finding is that it's not as accurate as they would like it to be. Obviously, it's getting better. A study just came out recently saying that about 45% of all queries have errors in them. The responses have errors in them. And that was a study done by the BBC. Another study shows that between 70 that agentic AI starts with about 70% accuracy and can get it up to about 90% accuracy. But that's about as good as it's going to get for now. And so when you start hearing and seeing numbers like that, you start questioning, okay, wait a minute, where can and should I use AI, and where maybe I should make sure that I'm really reviewing what AI is producing. At HawkSoft, we have a little bit of a maybe a conservative approach to AI a little bit because we have seen it where it has not necessarily given the best answers and the best accurate answers. And that's concerning when you are as an insurance agent, where if you get an answer for AI and you just tout it back to your insured and realize that it's not correct, that can be disconcerting a little bit, especially as you look at E&O coverage and that kind of thing.
To your point, which I hadn't considered this, it is one thing if I prompt something in ChatGPT and it hallucinates and doesn't give me the most accurate information. It's another thing if I prompt something in HawkSoft and ask for a certain coverage amount from a policy and it gives incorrect information. Then we're going to be mad at HawkSoft. So there's a certain amount, obviously, of responsibility and caution that you have to take. I mean, right? Which I'm sure you're thinking about.
Right. And that's absolutely correct. And that's one of the challenges, is that as we are putting AI features into HawkSoft, we have to be very aware of what its limitations are and making sure that we're also conveying that to the agent as well of what those limitations are.
It was interesting. When we started out last year, we kind of reached a point where we felt as a company we had the bandwidth and the necessity to start exploring, or at least experimenting with AI, specifically chat. And so internally, we went through a discussion of which ones do we want to use? Do we want to standardize on something? How do we ensure safety and that we're not communicating information that might somehow get leaked? So we went through an internal process on just the usage and allowing our staff to orient itself to using generative AI, as well as just communication or agentic chat. As we did that, we also looked at how we could apply it on the different roles and responsibilities we had internally. So from an engineering standpoint, can we start using various forms of AI to help review or automate some of the more mundane stuff we might do, review code and determine did an engineer do something, that they shouldn't have. So we went through a lot of that, and you had some people who were very excited about it, early adopters, and then we had some people that just refused. They didn't want to use it, which is pretty normal. It's pretty human. As we've gone through the course of this last year, the people that didn't like chat before, some of those might have moved towards it, but some people still have a pretty strong stance. I don't want to use this. That's just not for me. I was one of those people initially. And even as a CTO, I like to do things kind of hands-on, and I don't want to outsource that. But I have found incredible value in using AI to, again, automate a lot of the busy work, the repetitious work that AI can handle for the most part without hallucinating. And then we have expanded into that to starting to explore how we can specifically apply that for bigger initiatives, both just for internally at HawkSoft as well as for agencies. And I think, to Sean's point, our first and foremost concern is we would never roll out a technology or a solution for the sake of doing that solution. The hype train was real for us last year, and we were just so busy that we couldn't do what a lot of other companies had. And now that we're at a point where we're like, okay, the rubber hits the road, let's start looking at specifics and doing implementation for those in 2026. We're much more measured because that hype train has slowed down quite a bit. And I think that's good. It gives us a chance to breathe and really focus on how do we add value? What do our agencies want specifically? And then let's make sure that we meet those needs. Let's not create problems that look like solutions, but they actually are just like, I didn't ask for this. This is great, but this doesn't really help me, make my agency more efficient. And the last piece of that efficiency piece is, great, we've given you a solution. That solution should not take longer to type in to ask for what you want than if you were just to go do it yourself. So efficiency is important because doing chat costs more money than not doing chat or AI. And so if you're paying more, you better get more out of it. And I think that's really where Sean and I and the company stand.
Are there some specific programs or workflows that HawkSoft has looked at implementing, on the platform?
We've got a handful that we are looking at right now. One of them is the concept of Ask AI, where you can basically on the policy screen just ask it questions about the policy and be able to get answers back without having to dig looking for the information. Another one is being able to take a policy deck page that you might get from a carrier and ask it questions, and maybe even include that in that first Ask AI, from the policy. But also being able to then take, for example, these renewal decks and say, hey, let's do a comparison. Let's compare these two and see and have it give me the differences, because oftentimes that's what happens as a renewal. Carriers will drop things off or make changes that were not asked for, and it's hard to see that. And that's where AI does a really good job of being able to tell us those differences and identify those differences. So those are some of the kind of low-hanging fruit that we're looking at first. Matt alluded to this idea of being able to ask for a report and be able to say, in free form, hey, give me a report that has all the active policy count for this office with this carrier, whatever. Being able to just ask it in plain English and have it return the report instead of having to know how to summarize it and drill down and that kind of thing. Those are some definite low-hanging fruit that we're looking at. We've got some other things that we're contemplating, but I think we'll leave it there for today, for now.
I have a secret pet project that I haven't told Sean about. When you think about the use of AI, who would it benefit most and why? And one of the things that's always been interesting to me, I'm new to the insurance industry. I was in banking for decades, but there is a big difference between somebody who's been doing binding policies and working with customers for a year versus 20 years, who is familiar with working with different types of lines of business, and they really excel at specific lines, but they may not know anything about other lines, or if they move into a new area. And so one of the areas that I find interesting is that really AI is basically crowdsourced information. that has been honed in a way to where, it can level out the playing field to an extent. I ask myself this question: if I'm a fledgling insurance agency and I'm wanting to write a policy in an area where I might not be as familiar with, and I may not know what all the coverage needs are, or what the amounts, or what's common, is there a way for me to get that information in one ask, rather than kind of having to ask a lot of different people and try to, acquire that information? And in many places, in ways you can't. You'd have to ask your competitors, what would you do here? So stuff like that's interesting. Like, how can it actually augment my lack of knowledge on a subject in a way that makes me a little bit more competitive? Anyway, so it's a personal pet project. It's not endorsed by HawkSoft or any of its affiliates.
It's interesting that, Sean, you mentioned that the ability to compare, say, a renewing policy, with the current policy, which is something that some of us are utilizing now. And you mentioned, yes, AI giving us the capability to take a mundane task, and I'll give you an example of something that we are, using in our agency as a renewal process. We are having a VA go through our monthly renewals and analyzing what each account, and analyzing what are the policy weaknesses, or what we have for coverage standards, and what do we need to suggest to that customer on the renewal. So the first thing that I thought of with how can AI help within HawkSoft is to ask it to run a report from January 1st through January 31st, analyze all the home policies and, specific to these coverage standards, and been able to spit out a report for 30 days with one prompt. And then, does it have the capability to put that in a, client friendly, sort of proposal? So I think you hit it on the head with a workflow that helps all of us, that makes all of us more efficient to begin with. From what you've seen, can you build a AI that is capable of a system such as that, and talk about what that looks like a little bit?
I think this is my my love-hate relationship with AI. Last week I spent taking a simple spreadsheet and having AI trying to give me summaries, and I had to ask it multiple times before it would finally stop making up data. And that's one of the challenges that we have, is that how do you get AI to actually do what you're asking it to do? And I think a lot of that is where the work is trying to get it to not hallucinate. That stat about 70 to 90% accuracy comes from an MIT study. And that's just it, is that if it was only 70% accurate, would you want to use it?
No.
If it was 90% accurate, would you want to use it? Maybe. But those are the questions, is that we're trying to get to that 96, 90, 100% accuracy, and that's where some of the challenges go. Now, having said that, it's getting better, and it's every month it's getting better. And so we are definitely heading that direction, and that's something that where HawkSoft in 2026 is exploring, is where are those guardrails? Where can it be successful, and where are we comfortable saying we're not there yet, but we're close? We're almost there. It's not quite there, but we're close. And so that's something that we're evaluating what AI can do. It's awesome taking and generating something from nothing, and we see that all the time. It's really good at it. I mean, I hardly write an email anymore by myself. I just put a bullet point out there, and it writes the email for me, and it does a lot better job than I could ever do on it. But it's the other side, that it's not as accurate as we would want it to be. One of the things that leads me to think about is we're looking at a lot of what a lot of the companies are doing. In fact, recently, our chief marketing officer went to a show that was talking about these startups in AI. And like 90% of them has AI in the name of their company. But as they were talking about what they did, he was like, I don't need AI to do that. That's just an automation. Yeah. We can automate that without AI. And so that's what we're seeing a lot right now, is a lot of things are saying, well, that's AI. It's like, well, no, they just automated something and we can automate that. We don't need AI technology to automate that. And so there's a little bit of confusion of how much of it is AI and how much of it is just thinking outside the box, going, wait a minute, we can automate this better than we've done in the past.
I think it would be useful for those that are viewing that are not familiar with how AI and how models work. I think it would be useful to have just a really basic understanding and then how that applies to HawkSoft. So most people here have either heard of chat or they've used ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude or this whole slew of companies that are rolling out really more of a conversational chat where you're having natural language communication with it. Those are backed by models that cost a lot of money to make and a ton of computation, but they're really just analyzing publicly available data. And they're looking for patterns, and they're taking the commonality of letters and words and all of these things, and they break them down into tokens, and it's basically predictive. So it's not necessarily innovative. If I'm having a chat conversation with something, it's not going to be able to tell me how to do something that's never been done. If it does, we sometimes call that hallucination. And it's like, well, it might be trying to come up with something that's novel, but that's not its purpose. It just went off the rails a little bit. So the challenge is those AI chats that we use are just general. There's nothing specific about them. You're not using a chat that is specific for, say, insurance. So if you start asking it questions about insurance, it can only respond based on the data it's ingested that's publicly available through the internet or however it acquired that data. And so when we look at what and how chat might be used by our agencies, we would have to take a model and then train on top of that agent-specific or agency-specific data, insurance data, terminology, the language. It has to kind of learn. So if you think of, for those of you that have had kids, you know what three-year-olds hallucinate. They believe they can do anything. If you tell a 3-year-old something, I can do that. Don't teach me. And once they get to 4 and 5 and 6, then they start developing, more complexity and they're able to understand things a little bit better. But you're still not going to send off your 4 or 5-year-old to go do a task that that you would do. Chances are there's going to be some errors there. But if you teach that child how to do that with enough repetition and enough reinforcement and correct it, then the child will be able to do the task. And that's basically what AI does. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. And so really what that means for us is, as a company, we might look at 4 different models. And then we have to take the time and build the infrastructure to train those models, additionally train those models on either genericized data or more just, accord standard data, language and terminology, or even specific data from, say, us as a company or a volunteer agency. And with enough training, and then we ask it questions, and it's going to go off the rails, and we do what's called prompt engineering, where you try to teach it how to communicate more accurately. And that requires training and feedback. So that's a lot of time investment that you have to put in. And then the challenge we might face is, great, well, all of the major AI companies release a brand new model. And the models that we have are either now outdated, and we have to go start all over again with a brand new model. Time and money that we weren't having to spend prior to, say, 2026. Or we stay on the older model and run the risk of being relegated or being outdated. That's the challenge really that we have with AI, is that to make it truly, to give you what you had asked for, Brad, something that is contextually relevant and accurate, and that the agent or the model understands the context of what you're asking, we have to be able to train it on that. And then there's that constant feedback cycle of keeping it current. And dealing with, well, this new model came out and it behaves very different. So now we have to kind of start over from scratch on how we train it. And those are the things that we're looking at, because, that is a lot of work to do and to stay relevant. It's just evolving so fast. You're almost, it's just a cost. It's just a big cost hole if you're too ahead of the curve on it. And so this is not a great time for us necessarily to be like early adopters, even maybe fast followers, just given our size. But it's really exciting, and there's tremendous promise there. So we are looking forward to that this year.
Ignorant agent question here, and you might have already covered this. Okay, so HawkSoft wants to implement AI. Is that something you build from scratch, or do you? I think as you were referencing, you take a model of AI from somewhere and kind of plug it in.
We would take a model.
Okay.
To start from scratch. We would need a few billion in funding.
Yeah.
We've resisted that. So we would pick a model or a few models so that we could kind of do A/B testing and see how different models perform. And then we would spend time training up that model. And then we would run our own agent infrastructure. We're hosted in Azure, and we would run those agents and the model off of Azure. And then we would connect the agent and the model to our specific data that would have to be authenticated. So if I'm a user and I'm in, we know that you're authenticated within that chat session, and you can only then work with your data based on your own the rules and restrictions that we have in place already. So you can't access things that you don't have access to. But then it would have the ability to just interact with that data in a little bit more raw manner. And then we're having to constantly watch those. We would have to we need to be able to observe what happened in those conversations, because if it does something that it's not supposed to, or it gives erroneous information, we need to know, because we're going to get that phone call. And that's a challenge for us as well, because we have a product support staff that we have to then train up. And the last thing we want to do is double our call volume and have them all be, wow, AI chat told me this. And we're like,
didn't even think about that. Didn't even think about that. So they have to be trained up as well. Thoughts on, first, I guess, is there from the agency force a high demand to have an AI implementation? And if so, what types of features are being requested?
We did some regional hug events this last year. One of the questions always came up is, how are you implementing AI? And the question I said, well, what do you want us, what AI feature are you looking for? I'm like, I don't know, we just want AI. And I think that's one of the challenges, is that we see a lot where people, they want us to implement a solution to solve a problem that's not there. And that's one of the things. But having said that, there are a lot of, just like your example, Brad, that I thought you gave was a great example, is I want to be able to analyze, all of the renewals coming up in the month of January, and I want you to analyze where there are shortcomings. I think that's a great example of a use case for AI. I think there's, a lot of it is how can we build in the things that they're already doing using AI today, but just make it easier. And those are some of the low-hanging fruit that I suggested earlier. Being able to just ask it questions, being able to do deck comparisons. Matt brought up the whole the reporting, being able to ask for a report in just English. Some of the things that where we've got some, and like what you said, Brad, is more how do you automate being able to basically say, hey, please send this person an ID card, and again in plain text, be able to say, send this customer ID card followed with an email regarding whatever, and have AI just go out and do it. And that part scares me a little bit. But it's where we're going, and we've got to get there.
Imagine that you're running a chat and you say, give me a list of all the active policies that are coming up for renewal in the next 6 months. And the chat says, okay, here's a 10 meg download, CSV download, of data dump essentially of your agency. You've got that information. It's not exactly what you're looking for. But the last thing we want is for you to be asking for that information, not even once, but 2, 3, 4 times. Because ultimately, one of the challenges that we have to kind of work through with this as we're looking at different functionality is, what can we offer for functionality that would be cost effective for us as a provider, not punitive to the agency? Like now I have to pay for these AI, each of these chat sessions. I'm paying ChatGPT every month, my $25 or $50 or whatever. Now I got to pay HawkSoft that per user, and or how can you get more point functionality? So one of the things Sean identified early on is, I want to look at all the logs on a client. I want you to summarize all the logs and give me just a quick synopsis the TLDR of this user or this policyholder, client, et cetera. And being able to look across data and aggregate and make those decisions. I think things like that are really valuable because the more specific you can be with what your need is and what your ask is, the more likely you're going to get something that will have value to you. We just rolled out an update to our help system, and that help system actually does have AI built into it. And so we are kind of tracking usage. We haven't seen much, but that's something that we're also kind of paying attention to. How do people interact with that when they're trying to learn how to navigate around inside HawkSoft? There are point solutions, whether it's an email summary, log summaries, the comparison stuff that Sean has talked about. But I think when we go to the national and as we're talking to agencies, what specifically are they looking, what problems do they want to solve? And I think that question has to be answered before we really do anything of true consequence other than internal discovery and learning to prepare ourselves to be able to roll out and meet those needs. But those questions are really important for us. And it's been difficult to get clarity on.
Yeah, one of the things that we've got actually several of our API partner vendors that are doing, and as we're actually looking at rolling out a change here to our API, we'll just say sometime, that allows our vendors to be able to create clients and policies. And with that, there's a couple of vendors that are able to take, for example, a deck page and be able to take the data off of the deck page and automatically create the client and fill in all the fields. To me, that's a powerful use of AI where I don't have to data enter all that, especially on a very complex commercial policy. If I could give it its prior deck page and say, insert this client in there, and have all the data sitting there, and I may have to go through and correct some of the fields, but to have the most of it in there would be powerful. So it's those types of things as well that we're looking at.
That brought to mind another question, which was with the AI component, and now some of your vendor partners are AI platforms. Is there extra precaution just because there is an AI component that has to be considered and looked at if they're going to be integrated with HawkSoft? Because again, from my ignorant, mind of looking at it, the thought of machine learning, well, can this get in there and do? HawkSoft is, which we appreciate, is very protective of our data and cautious. Is there extra vetting to your partner platforms that are getting in to our HawkSoft data?
There is a vetting process up front, and there's due diligence that we do to make sure that each partner that we bring on board the system is following what our expected practices are. Ultimately, though, we don't control the technologies that each of our partners might implement their solutions on top of. There was a great example, and this is kind of off topic, but one of our partners uses a technology solution called Snowflake. And so that means that they're taking data that they might have pulled out of our vendor API or our partner API, and they might have put that information into like a data warehouse that's hosted by a third-party company. And if that third-party company is compromised for any reason, or those data is compromised, then that partner has to deal with that data leak ramification. Unfortunately, there's nothing really we can do. The agency controls whether or not they want to turn that on or off. We act as a conduit, and we do our best effort to protect them from things they may not be aware of. But ultimately, that's the extent of our ability to control that. We don't know what happens with that data once it leaves. AI is a great example when we started out thinking about implementing, regardless of who the provider was. One of the big concerns we had was the information that was being leaked out of OpenAI, or information that had been subpoenaed, for example, by other companies. And so if that information is our customers' data or our customers' policyholders' data that has PII or other information in there that absolutely cannot go out in the public domain, then we kind of forbid that for our company, utilizing any kind of chat solution where that information might be put in there. Obviously, that doesn't stop our agencies from doing it. So there's a per agency risk of, are they putting stuff into ChatGPT or another solution that maybe shouldn't be there? And we have no idea what each of our partners might be doing as well. So there is that risk. That risk is increasing pretty quickly, especially if they're utilizing some of these bigger companies like OpenAI, where they may not have the same controls and safeguards that we have. And that's a challenge.
And to that point, Matt, if I can jump in on that, one of the things that I stress strongly to our customers is that if you're using a free AI chat, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Copilot, whatever it is, if you're using the free version, then they are training their models on your prompts and your data, which means that data is now being subject to being opened up to other people being able to access it. So please, to our customers, do not be using free versions of AI chats. You need to be making sure that you are using those that have those protections in place.
What would you say to, there's a small percentage of the agency force that is maybe needy, has high expectations, has high expectations, and is maybe saying, why don't we have this on the system? ABC company is using it. Why don't we have this yet?
One of the challenges that we have as a company is that when you're a small, really small company, almost every request that every customer has, you want to facilitate because that's how you grow and remain viable, et cetera. When you reach a certain point where you have thousands and thousands of customers or agencies, they all have different needs. And so if you were to look at any cross-section of HawkSoft's customer base, you will have 100 different buckets of how they operate, how they use data, how they input data into the system. And then that is the single biggest challenge, I think, that, Sean, we have had, especially for the last 6 years. And once we went to HawkSoft 6, because if you ask 10 people, they want 10 different things for the exact same feature. Ultimately, whatever we do cannot cater to the 1% or the 10%. It's the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We are limited on how much staff and time and money we have that we can put towards enhancing HawkSoft on a yearly basis. And so that kind of goes back to why we want to ensure that whatever we do roll out isn't a solution for 20% or a segment of our customer base that seems like they're getting favorable treatment. It needs to meet, at a minimum, the baseline needs to be that it helps at least 50, 60, 70% of our agencies. And so there are going to be agencies that are that 1% that want that functionality. And that's why we have a partner ecosystem to allow them to be able to choose best of breed and to use that kind of boutique model and say, I want to go with this other solution provider because they offer functionality beyond what HawkSoft does. And that's the power of our partner ecosystem. So I would say for those agencies that are looking for that, look for a partner. And if you find somebody that is doing what you need, but they're not a partner yet, advocate for them to be able to become a partner. And that will help continue to make that community grow.
I'm going to go in a different direction than Matt did a little bit. We've got a survey that will be coming out here probably in a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, that is really going to hone in on direction that our customers want us to go. And I think that is one of the biggest things that, going back to Matt's thing, is it's hardest to know what, with that many users and agencies, what is the need, and how do we get that? I think something that Brad, you and I talked about, that the three of us talked about at the very beginning before we started this, is how quickly, how every week we're putting out new updates. Yeah. HawkSoft is continuing to innovate and to put out new features every week. We've got a weekly release, which is actually insane as a software company, just because of the amount, for how small we are and everything we're able to put out. My point in saying that is that things are coming, and be looking for them as they come out. It's interesting how we'll roll out features all the time, and we'll have an agency 6 months, a year after a feature rolls out, who say, yeah, we're leaving, we're going to, so-and-so as a competitor because you guys don't have this feature. We're like, yes, we do. We've had that feature for a year. And they just don't know it's there. And part of that is just getting them to read, of the what's new, but also encouraging people to come to the Hug events because we highlight a lot of what's the new features that have come out at those Hug events and train on those features.
Which that's I think that is true of every piece of tech that we use. It's that you have to stay on top of it. In fact, one of the goals that I set in our agency is for someone on our team to review the updates that have come out, because specifically to HawkSoft. Because if we don't do that, we're going to miss them. And I see the messages every single week. Unless I stop and look at them, I don't know that they're there. So we could be missing out on things that are useful. That's at our fingertips, and we're just not taking advantage of it. And that's true of whether it's my CRM platform or anything else.
And to that point, as we look at back at 2025 was really about making sure. I mean, we've just gone through a major change from HawkSoft 5 to HawkSoft 6. That is a huge change, and realizing of areas in the program that we either missed or needs that and so we've been rolling out features to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those the people that are on HawkSoft 6. 2026 is going to be a different year for us a little bit, because we're past a lot of those immediate need type of things, and we're able to step back and go, okay, wait a minute. What are some of these larger features? What are these larger things that will make a huge impact with our customers? Things that we're looking at right now are these more automated tasks and automated workflows. Being able to, some of these AI features that we talked about. But there's a lot of these larger initiatives that 2026 that we'll be focusing on in 2026. I'm really excited about some of the direction that we're going, because it's going to fundamentally change not only what the management system can do, but what our agencies can do with it, and it's gonna fundamentally change how they interact with it, which is exciting. So,
well, I think there's something that relates to this, is that, so yes, AI is the hottest topic in our industry, and for those that are looking at it, that are, whether it's Facebook groups or chat groups or whatever it is, what are the tools that are useful to us? It's to the point of, it's one thing to say, oh, I have an AI program. Okay, well, what does it do for you? Do we want something that is useful, that helps us, or we just want to say that there is AI included, in HawkSoft? So I appreciate the standpoint of, let's get this right and be responsible for it. And I think those numbers are very telling of the false information that is put out there. And frankly, a lot of novice, people that are using AI might not realize that. It's, for those that have been paying attention, we know that there's this false information, these hallucinations that happen. A lot of us don't.
Let me give you two examples outside of HawkSoft. And if one of them was our COO was recently at his favorite donut shop. As he went through the drive-through, they've replaced the drive-through with an AI voice. So you order through AI. And he got up there, and they went there because they saw the light said that all of the donuts were currently hot. And so he ordered and said, hey, because we want to get a bunch of hot donuts right now because they're hot right now. And the AI said, no, I'm sorry, you have to come back another time. They're not hot right now. And he's like, no, I'm looking at the light. The light's on, saying they're hot. And the chat dropped. The AI voice came back and said, no, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to come back at another time. And he drove around and walked in and said, hey, the light's on. I can see the donuts are coming out hot, but your chatbot says that they're not. And they go, yeah, it's wrong most of the time. And I thought, ouch. Another example was I alluded to it earlier, I had a spreadsheet that I've been working on. I've got to get some summaries for tax purposes. And I had it try summarizing, and it gave a summary, and I said, awesome, this is great. Summarize about 2,000 lines of these projects that we've been working on. And it gave a great summary for each one of them. And I started just copying and pasting them into this tax document. And on the third one, I read it and went, that's not what we did on that project. And so I went back to it and said, hey, this isn't right. He said, oh, you're right. I made that up. let me give you the actual summary. But it still didn't do it. It still made up another summary. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. and it took me like 3 or 4 times before it finally was like, oh, you're right. I was making all that up. Here's the actual summary. Yeah. And I was like, seriously, it sounds like talking to a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And so that's the big concern is that there is a lot of errors that AI is producing that I'm not sure if people aren't careful, aren't reviewing. And so one of the things at HawkSoft that we have is that we have a policy that, we encourage our employees to use AI because it does definitely save on time. However, anything they put out, they are personally responsible for. Yeah. So if they put something and put it out there saying, yep, this is it, it doesn't matter if it's generated by AI. They better have read what AI generated. They better have been able to sign off saying, yes, I'm certifying that is accurate. And hopefully our agencies are doing the same thing, that when they're using AI, that they're reviewing every word and ensuring that it's accurate before they put it out. AI is extremely powerful tool. It's awesome what it can do. And with that, though, we've got to make sure that it's accurate and we're not just blindly going where it goes.
That phrase, trust but verify, but I think that where we're at in the curve of AI is still mostly distrust, verify, and then I think we'll get to a point where we are more trusting because there's a history of trust that is accrued with whatever your agent or assistant is that you're using. Yeah. One thing to kind of wrap up what you had asked about in terms of agencies and maybe wanting AI functionality. As a company, every day we have to make a decision as to where we spend our effort towards. And the ultimate goal for us is that it's got to move everybody forward, as I alluded to before. But every hour that we spend on AI is an hour not spent on something else. And one of the things that we want to be mindful of is that we do not pursue AI at the expense of things that our agencies are clamoring for now. And we have a very vibrant and active community. We work weekly with multiple teams to make sure that we are moving forward and addressing those urgent needs that the agencies have. And we don't ever want to sacrifice that at the expense of shiny toys or exploring new technologies that don't have a more immediate impact. So as we go throughout the course of 26, the focus will be doing it responsibly with clear deliverables, understanding that learning and education are probably more important for us as we adapt to this. And we don't, like we said before, we don't put anything out that we wouldn't have 100% confidence in. And so for those agencies that are looking, that want to take those risks, that's not really who we are as a company. And I would imagine that most of those agencies would say, don't do that with any other area of the system. And so if that's the case, we would just think of AI as just another feature within the platform that should hold to that same standard.
To Matt's point, we want to make sure that as we are rolling features out, that they are actually meeting the needs. We've got a team that we're actually going to be spinning up here shortly that is focused entirely on AI and seeing what we can and what we can do with it. So as we look to 2026, those we will be rolling out some AI features. And I'm just excited, but we want to do it responsibly. We want to make sure that we are not just rolling it out for the sake of rolling it out.
To wrap this up, do you guys have any parting words on AI in general or how it relates to HawkSoft?
My big thing is that it's probably that not that AI will replace your job, but those that know how to use it will. As we move forward. People are starting to, in their hiring process, they're looking for people that know and understand how to use AI and use it responsibly and use it well. And so just my biggest thing is definitely should be exploring it. Every agent should be looking at ways they can do it. But now my other caveat to that is, but also verify that it's actually delivering real value. Make sure that sometimes we do things. In fact, my wife is in photography, and she recently got this AI tool that was just amazing at what it can do. And I started talking to her and realized that, yeah, it's amazing what it can do, but now she's spending all this time and money and she's not actually making any more money. She's taking more time and spending more money, but she's not actually making any more money as a photographer. And so that's just, we've got to make sure that the return on investment is there. As we look at those things.
I came up in the era of building online banking and bill payment and automation on the banking side when I started out in doing customer service. And the worry was that you would be putting people out of jobs. Automation puts people out of jobs. We've seen that from manufacturing and then the information era. And the next big hype was there won't be service centers anymore. You'll always be talking to a computer. And we're finally kind of at that precipice where it does feel like the technology has the potential to have this next round of automation. I think the challenge, though, is that ultimately, if there are no humans involved in any of this, then what's the point? If we just want computers to talk to each other all day long, we can do that. Not particularly value add for any of us, but AI is not going to replace the need for human beings. It is a tool that helps augment people in a variety of different ways, depending on what their job is. Regardless of what the craft is, the more variance, the more uncertainty, the more ambiguity, the less valuable AI is going to be. It can summarize email and clean up your language because it has a trillion different samples to identify what's a good way to write a sentence and what's a bad way, and then understands intonation and tone based on what it's learned. But it's a different thing to say, I'm going to outsource half of my insurance agency's administrative duties to a bot. That is not a thing. And moreover, that kind of defeats the purpose of being an independent agent or agency and being able to have a human touch. And it's about people and it's about the impact that we have on them. I think of AI as a great promise with a lot of potential. It is still very young. And I don't want to say immature because that implies a negative connotation, but it's young and it's going to take time. I think having reasonable expectations about it are important. I think it's important to remember that it is actually quite expensive and that anybody that implements an AI solution, they're going to be paying more cost for it, regardless of how you get it. And so the question is, does that cost translate to value that exceeds the cost? Yeah. And if it doesn't, then you have a technology that's creating problems, not solving them. Yeah. And that's kind of that precipice of where we're at. And we're really excited about the next 3 or 4 years. I think we're going to be able to do some pretty amazing things in the coming years.
Can I add, Matt, one thing that I love that you brought up is that ultimately it's about relationships. And AI and any other tool should augment relationships, not replace relationships. And that's, especially as we look at independent insurance agencies, that's what they bring is a relationship. It's, I can talk to a real person and I can get real answers and I can actually create a relationship that's powerful. And I think that's the crux of it, is making sure that whatever automation we're putting into place, it doesn't replace those relationships.
Well put. I think that's a great place to wrap this up. I think there's a lot of good information, and I like what you said that this is early, and I agree with you that the whole all of it is immature. I think that's a good way to put it. So I think this has been great. So thank you both for taking time today and sharing. I think the audience is really going to enjoy it.